Albedo is the perfect character for a standard banner, but that's another conversation for another day. Today I'm back with an Albedo build guide, and the very first one for Albedo on this channel, surprisingly enough. Even with the sweeping changes to Genshin that Dendro has brought, Albedo still remains a solid sub DPS character for many teams. He was never the best sub DPS, but he's definitely far from the worst. If you like his character a lot but you're still a little concerned about usability in a game state where Dendro is just super popular, I say you really have nothing to worry about. He's easy to build, he doesn't need constellations, and he can fit into more than just pure Geo teams, making him one of the more flexible Geo characters we have alongside Zhongli. As always, this guide will cover Albedo's best artifacts and weapons to general playstyle and team compositions. Without further ado, let's get this guide rolling. Given that Albedo has been out for a long time, most of you probably already know what he does. If you don't, he's really simple. There are really only two main things that you need to know about Albedo. First is his elemental skill. Place it down to create a field, and anytime your characters deal damage to enemies within this field, Albedo's flower will hit the enemy for geo damage based on his defense. This geo damage proc is known as a transient blossom. You can replace the flower with a new one every 4 seconds, but the field actually lasts a whopping 30 seconds, so one upside of Albedo is that he's one of the characters that requires the least field time in order to maximize his DPS. Second thing you need to know about him is his elemental burst and his second ascension talent. His elemental burst has a 40 energy cost and a 12-second cooldown, which is on par with several other characters for the lowest cost and cooldown in the game. All it does is blast enemies for AoE geo damage once, and then creates 7 more hits similar to his elemental skill's transient blossoms if his flower is deployed on the field. Unfortunately, the skill does not have any defense scaling until you get his C2, but that's not an issue because normally we're only concerned about his elemental skill damage and not too much about his elemental burst damage. The reason I say this is because the real catch about using Albedo's burst at C0 is his second ascension talent, which grants 125 elemental mastery to the party for 10 seconds. This, combined with his stellar off-field damage, makes him an enticing support for several other teams, not just triple or quadruple Geo teams. And as for more theory crafting stuff, there's not really much for me to say here aside from 2 small bits of information that can help you understand Albedo even better than before. Revisiting his elemental skill, what I didn't touch upon is his proc rate and his energy generation. So Albedo's transient blossoms can only hit enemies once every 2 seconds, which is more often than not going to be closer to 2.5 seconds with slower attackers and other hit lag considerations. With this time frame in mind, Albedo has a 67% chance to generate 1 geoparticle for every transient blossom that hits. That's about on par with other characters that generate 4 energy particles every 15 seconds or 3 particles every 12 seconds. Given that Albedo only has a 40 energy cost burst and most of those other characters have 60 energy cost bursts, that's a pretty good deal. Most of the time we only need around 120 to 130 ER on Albedo to use his burst every rotation, assuming each rotation is in the ballpark of 20 to 25 seconds. And last but not least, there's one quick tip with Albedo to get more DPS. The 2-second timer between transient blossoms is not a universal timer, but a timer for the current flower on the field. What this means is that when we replace the current flower with a new flower, the timer resets and we can instantly proc another transient blossom hit. To maximize Albedo's damage, when you're switching him in, make sure to proc a transient blossom first with a normal attack, then replace the flower, and finally normal attack with Albedo once again before switching out. What this does is it creates a quick succession of hits that goes from transient blossom proc to the flower's initial skill damage immediately to another transient blossom proc. This is a great way to min-max Albedo's easy playstyle for those looking to squeeze out just a tiny bit more damage. Albedo's artifacts have gotten less awkward and more streamlined thanks to the 4-set Husk of Opulent Dreams. With the introduction of this set, Albedo now has a clear best-in-slot artifact. Given that he pretty much spends all of his time off-field, it's ridiculously easy to benefit from the sheer stat value of defense and geo damage bonus that this 4-set can give. Other options for Albedo's artifacts are pretty limited and mostly account for more supportive playstyles. For endgame players, we have the classic 4-set Noblesse to grant 20% attack alongside his 125 elemental mastery buff, or even the 4-set Tenacity of the Millilith for that same 20% attack buff, but also a 30% increase to shield strength. Basically, if you don't have the 4-set Husk and your crit stats kinda suck, look to use any of these supportive options to increase team DPS and then focus on farming the correct damage set for Albedo in the future. As for Albedo's artifact stats, nothing beats defense in the sands, geo damage bonus in the goblet, and crit rate or crit damage in the circlet. Substat priority should be crit rate, crit damage, defense percent, energy recharge, and flat defense. Albedo's main focus is to deal damage with his transient blossoms, which have defense scaling, and these stat priorities reflect that. And like I mentioned before when talking about Albedo's energy generation specifics, 120 to 130% energy recharge is the perfect spot for Albedo to sit. This can increase to 140% or decrease to 100% depending on the teammates you decide to pair Albedo with. Artifacts were ridiculously easy for Albedo, and I'm sure you're delighted to hear that Albedo's weapons are also a breeze to figure out. Not only are they easy to understand, but your best two options are completely free to play. Now that's what I call getting value out of the Primo Gems that you spent for Albedo. So, kicking things off with your best weapon, it's going to be Cinnabar Spindle, followed by Harbinger of Dawn. If you were here for patch 2.3, then rejoice because the 4-star event weapon is literally a weapon made for Albedo and only Albedo as of the patch that I'm recording this, which is 3.1. You get a fat defense stat and a passive that further increases your elemental skill damage by 80% of your defense at R5 and level 90. The only downside is that it will be a little hard to balance crit stats with this weapon compared to Harbinger of Dawn. And speaking of Harbinger of Dawn, this is the weapon you should use if you were not around during patch 2.3 to get Cinnabar Spindle. This 3-star weapon at R5 and level 90 will give you 28% crit rate and 46.9% crit damage as long as you're above 90% HP. That passive condition is pretty easy for Albedo to stay above because he spends most of his time off-field. The other weapon that deserves a mention for Albedo is the Primordial Jade Cutter. Like Harbinger of Dawn, this is yet another weapon that makes it unbelievably easy to build crit on Albedo. The passive that converts HP into attack also benefits his burst damage without C2, since at C0 and C1, Albedo's burst only scales with attack and not defense. Overall, Jade Cutter is a premium 5-star option that only slightly outpaces Harbinger of Dawn when spamming his burst off cooldown. Generally, I'd save Jade Cutter for other premium 5-star sword characters like Ayato, Keqing, or Ayaka, and then use Harbinger on Albedo since it does perform slightly better when your rotations utilize his burst closer to the time frame of 20 to 25 seconds. And just like that, we're already at the team section of this video. Albedo's sub DPS is appreciated anywhere, but there are some clear best fits for Albedo if you're looking to optimize your gameplay. As always, don't be afraid to use a character like Albedo anywhere you want, but today I'll be giving you some of the standard teams if you don't know where to start. The first team we have is Albedo as part of a standard Vaporized team. The most common archetype of this team consists of Hu Tao, Xingqiu, Zhongli, and Albedo. Hu Tao is replaceable for any Vaporized attacker like Yoimiya or Yanfei, while Xingqiu's obvious replacement is going to be Yelan. The premise of this team is to have your Pyro and Hydro core supported by both Zhongli and Albedo. Zhongli provides Res Shred and a shield, while Albedo provides ample off-field damage and elemental mastery for vaporized reactions with his burst and ascension talent. Some players may not have Zhongli, so the most common replacements for him include Toma for shielding, Yunjin for normal attack buffing, Bennett for healing and attack buffs, or even Candice and Yelan for the Hydro Resonance and other various buffs. Keep in mind that if you are replacing Zhongli, you have to choose wisely with supports to maximize synergy. For example, if you want Yunjin, she works best with Yoimiya and not so much with charge attack characters like Hu Tao and Yanfei. Another example would be adding Candice. Candice can buff the normal attacks of Yoimiya, so she's a decent fit for her. Even though Hu Tao doesn't need the normal attack buff, the Hydro Resonance is good enough to make Candice an okay fit for her if you don't have Yelan and want to pair her with Xingqiu. However, Yanfei can neither benefit much from the Hydro Resonance or the buff normal attack since she's mainly a charge attacker, so adding in Candice with Yanfei as your main DPS is the least recommended. In the end, these Vaporized teams perform the strongest with both Albedo and Zhongli, but definitely have other options should you want to use a 4-star option and make things more free-to-play friendly. The second team we have is by far the most pay-to-win setup that exists for Albedo. The team is a hyper carry Xiao team where we use no reactions and go double Animo with double Geo. Aside from Xiao and Albedo, we also slot in Zhongli and Jean for support and completing resonances. This team is extremely functional at C0 for all of your 5-star characters, but does have some pretty huge power spikes at later constellations that really only whales are able to experience. Jean C4 reduces Animo resistance by 40% for enemies in her healing field, and Albedo C4 gives the team 30% increased plunging attack damage. Both of these buffs can make your Xiao a complete monster alongside Zhongli's Res Shred and Geo Resonance. And last but not least, the third standard popular team for Albedo is going to be the Mono Geo setup. I'm sure you guys all saw this one coming. The team consists of Albedo, Ito or Noelle, Goro, and a flex character. The core of Albedo, Goro, and either Noelle or Ito make for a deadly combo not only because these characters can benefit off Goro's defense buffs, but having 3 Geo characters also unlocks the Geo damage bonus buff that Goro's skill can give. As for the flex slot, you can put all your eggs into one basket by going a 4th Geo character like Zhongli, but you also have other options from other elements. If you're using Ito and don't have Zhongli, Diana will provide great shielding and healing, which your core Geo characters lack. If you want big damage boosts for Ito and Noelle outside of the other Geo supports, then look no further than Bennett or Kujo Sara. Since both Ito and Noelle convert their defense to attack and have attack scaling still, Kujo Sara and Bennett are great attack supports. Sarah can provide extra energy to the team with her Ascension talent, while Bennett provides much needed healing if you're not playing Noelle. Albedo is a character that I'm confident will continue to remain solid for a long time to come, even if he's never going to be that omnipotent and definitive character along the lines of something like Hu Tao or Raiden Shogun. If you made it this far, let me know if you're an Albedo haver down in the comments below and tell me what gear and teams you have for him. With that, if you enjoyed this guide or thought it was useful, be sure to support both the video and the channel. You can follow me on Twitch or sub to the YouTube channel, whatever people do nowadays. Other than that, it's the same as always. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.